situation that the men who are most vulnerable in many of these cases, or at least more likely to develop, whether it is not just mood problems, but lots of substance use problems and things like that, are also less likely then to seek help because they value handling problems on their own, just taking care of things themselves. They end up throwing themselves into their work or into, now it's these days like, Tinder, hookups and things like that, obviously substance use and things. And so they mask or hide from a lot of the emotional distress. And then what gets attention is these acting out behaviors, like, oh, you're drinking a lot. Oh, you're working all the time. That's all you do is work. And so you're, obviously doing all sorts of kind of, casual sexual playboy types of, relationships. And those things really draw attention because they can be really destructive. But they also ignore that in many of those cases, there's other kinds of emotional distress underneath that, whether it is histories of trauma, histories of abuse, or, untreated mood and anxiety disorders. Lots of times, social anxiety, generalized anxiety that I'll see men cover up through some of these other kinds of behaviors, especially substance use. You'll see that, especially for like social anxiety.
Well, do you think it has a lot to do with like values in our society, what men should really value, as well as kind of what the media says a man should be, movies, television shows?
Exactly. Like those, the pressure to conform to those masculine norms. If you think about it too, it's there's a lot of pressure for guys to be on top and be in charge, and being on top, being in charge means being dominant, not showing weakness. It often means not having a lot of close relationships and being vulnerable. It means sometimes not having or prioritizing friendships or family because a lot of men have that pressure to be on the top, be in control, be successful. And that leaves them very lonely. And they're often the things that actually give people the most meaning in life are often the opposite of being on the top. It is those relationships, those moments of vulnerability, those connections, the family relationships, things like that many men actually end up finding a lot of meaning in. But for a long time, they find they've had all this pressure and they've worked towards this masculine ideal. And then I might be seeing them later in life and they're like, I've accomplished these things, but I'm not happy.
Right.
And their wives aren't happy, their kids aren't happy. Like it's unfortunate, it creates this sort of systemic effect on a lot of lives.
Well, yeah, it's almost like a profile where you want to look good. You want to get all these certifications, these master's degrees, PhDs. You think people are going to look at you differently, and you think you're going to feel differently having all these nice accomplishments, nice cars, nice house.
Yeah.
And it might give you like a short-term high, but at the end of the day, from what I've noticed is that that's all it is a short-term high. And then you go back to normal and you're like, what now?
Exactly. Like, when I've worked with some men and I will, be working with them around their mood or anxiety, and I'll talk about antidepressant activities and how, it's really important that on a regular basis that, people engage in activities that give them, enjoyment or pleasure and give them accomplishment and give them meaning in their life. But what I find is a lot of men focus purely on the accomplishment. And so, yes, they get some lift to their mood. They do feel better. Like it does feel good to accomplish things. But if something happens like in their career or, financially, it leaves them so vulnerable to depression, substance use, things like that. Their life crumbles because they put all their eggs in one basket of sorts. They've really focused on accomplishment. And they don't have much in the way of enjoyment in their life, and they don't have as much in the way of meaning in their life. And so, they feel just really in those cases kind of like empty, and it can be a downward spiral after that.
Honestly, the first thought that's really popped in my head after all that is just, again, how we handle issues in the workplace or failure. And I feel like a lot of times we're programmed to handle things in a assertive but very aggressive manner to, again, like you said, show that dominance where if you, let's say, hypothetically have a disagreement with someone, well, you can't show weakness because if you show weakness, you're a coward and people are going to walk over you. I mean, it's programmed in our heads on how to handle
Mm-hmm.
situations.
You're right. Like it becomes the culture of organizations because men are in charge of many organizations. They've set the culture.
Yeah.
Um, you know, many organizations are very patriarchal, as well as our Western culture is as well. So you're right; it gets institutionalized, and so what's valued in many organizations is like being right, not flip flopping. Winning and
Yes.
sometimes at all costs, even
Yes.
um, uh, not seeking help sometimes, and putting work honestly first. And
Hmm.
they may not be the explicit message, but implicitly is sent. And then that is just put into it's indirectly put into the policies and the procedures and whether guys have time off for paternity leave and things like that, like
Yep.
all those things are remnants of the patriarchy in these organizations, all the male dominance and things.
Hmm. You know what that also kind of reminds me of as it comes to success is little kids playing sports and their parents,
Oh wow,
where
yeah.
I will like watch it and they will treat their child like they're going to be in the pros and they're constantly on them. And it's like, you need to win, 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 win. And the therapy side of me is like planning in my head like a family chart. And it's like, okay, you're showing triangulation like behavior now. Because again, they live their lives with these kids
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
the child might be thinking like I need to win or else my parents won't like me or love me, and that's the only way I can get affection from people if I'm successful, if I win, if I accomplish things.
absolutely. And I've worked with young adults and men who are really living from the effects of that,
Yeah.
where there was just immense pressure to perform in sports, and if they didn't perform, like they felt like their sometimes their particularly like their father's love would be
Yep.
withdrawn from them,
Get
and
yelled at
so
and
yeah. Exactly. Sometimes it was very explicit, like literally yelling at them, and
mhm.
they had many poignant moments in their adolescence where their value was largely determined based off their performance in sports. And so then that has, manifested later on in life with like their performance at work, the amount of
Mhm.
money that they achieve, those kinds of things, that pursuit of status. Now the status that's expanded beyond sports and these other areas, and they find themselves like pursuing these things with all their focus, energy, and um, they find that they're still not happy, and that this
Yeah.
is really stemming from these earlier adolescent and childhood experiences, um, and status wasn't everything, and it didn't give them happiness fully, and
Mhm.
so helping them to redefine what are their values in life has been a lot of the work with those individuals, is helping them to reconnect with their values or identify their values, which takes some time because they've heard again and again and again success, success, success,
Yeah.
dominance, power, work, all those kinds of things. So their initial